And we're back. Little easy transition there. With more Tucker Carlson tonight, we got another segment to get into, which I find redundant, but he's spent almost 3 nights on the same subject. So what we just went through was Tucker Democratic Party is planning a war on half of America. And then the following segment he decided to do was party in power is demonizing half of the country. It almost sounds a bit redundant, but that's kind of part of the right-wing echo chamber, is to reinforce, build the idea. You can't just plant the seed, you have to continue watering it. So that is the further diving of this episode called Anarcho-Authoritarianism. The idea that the further left that you go or the further right that you go will eventually lead you to the same place. It's not true. Horseshoe theory is a bullshit lie. Unfortunately, it's been built off of the idea of communist Russia, authoritarian regime, communist China, authoritarian regime, but because they use communism nominally just as a brand on there to pretend that their authoritarianism is benevolent and cares for the working class, as soon as you reach authoritarianism, you've reached the right. On my own personal opinion, because as far right as you can possibly go, you reach fascism, which is a merging of authoritarian government and a free laissez-faire capitalist system economically. I don't know, even if you have discussions with most people on the right side of the political spectrum, they'll say that the leftists are the actual fascists, the anti-fascists are actually the fascists, and that's the horseshoe theory, moving the true full power of the right wing from, they're no longer the farthest you go on right wing ideologies. You don't get fascism, you somehow get libertarianism, which is the idea of a really small government in a really laissez-faire capitalist system. But that never really has come into fruition either. It still usually tends to lead to a regime that's authoritarian, which regulates working class citizens and immigrants extremely hard while allowing the capitalist system to do whatever it wants. So, horseshoe theory is a bunch of malarkey, as our president would use that term. I don't know if he would agree that the theory in itself is malarkey, but to me it is, because it's this idea that the further left or right that you go, you eventually reach the same conclusion. But through historical context, we know that the further left that you go, you get Catalonia in Spain, an anarchist revolution trying a horizontal hierarchical system that, isn't dependent on a pyramid scheme. Whereas the farther right that you go, you have that one person at the top or a few people at the top who run everything. So, Tucker, party in power is demonizing half of the country. How and why?
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Inauguration Day. It's a big moment for the country. A changing of the guard, a peaceful transfer of power, another reassuring display of the awesome pageantry of constitutional government. There were solemn speeches today, sworn oaths, belted anthems, all echoing against the backdrop of 26,000 smartly attired federal troops who are guarding our capital city from unseen threats. It was quite a display. It was all a lot to take, really. So like many of you, we flipped on the tube to see what it meant. And here's what we learned.
Joe Biden respects government. He respects people who disagree with him. He listens to them.
I think that Joe Biden is going to train us to see the world differently.
He plans to usher in a new era of hope and the action he's promising the minute he takes office.
We've gone.
And what's really funny is I did hear like a quote from a while back from Joe Biden that said that he wanted to be the of his time. He wanted to be the Abraham Lincoln president, which, like, why would you want to be the Abraham Lincoln president? Like, did Abraham Lincoln, in order to bring the country back together, he divided it super hard with a civil war. And, I think it was for the right cause, the abolition of slavery, although Abraham Lincoln's not necessarily the perfect symbol of that, because he still believed that white supremacy was needed in order to keep order. But yeah, Joe Biden thinks that he's the Abraham Lincoln president who wants to reunite the entire country. And as long as we have the right-wing echo chamber, that's never going to happen. They're going to constantly be reactionary to whatever Biden does, the same way that they were with Obama. But they're also going to be reactionary from anything that moves the country further left on the political spectrum, because socialism is the ultimate evil. But Joseph Biden is not going to be the Abraham Lincoln president that he wants to be, and nor is he going to be unifying. The only thing that we're really going to get flavor, a difference in flavor from Biden compared to Trump, is that his language is going to be much more settled, where like as soon as Trump came to run for president, he immediately said that Mexico's giving us all of their rapists. That's not the language that Joe Biden's going to use, but that's why you have to watch Joe Biden's policies even harder than you do Trump, because Trump's language was ugly and his policies were ugly, so it was much easier to criticize him. The unfortunate fact is that CNN and MSNBC is going to ignore the ugly aspects of Biden's policies and focus merely on his words. And I think that's ultimately where the left or the Democrat liberal mainstream media is going to fail a lot of voters and people, and that's what's going to allow that vacuum to exist for right-wing people to grab people who are disaffected from the neoliberalist system and say, hey, this conservatism isn't so bad now, is it?
From indecency to decency.
He filled that empathy void.
There was not one part of that wasn't just medicine in the wound.
That's what I'm saying. You see, Tucker Carlson picks the perfect clips to highlight this. But until we actually see material conditions change for the most vulnerable and the most affected by the system, his words are meaningless. Meaningless. You got capitalism with a smile. That's all you're getting, rather than Trump's weird frog lips.
Those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America. It was a moment where the new president came to town.
So to recap, Joe Biden respects people's differences, but at the same time, he's going to...
Man, I don't know what they did, but his microphone has got hella static in it. Like, this is a professional news outlet, and that is a lot of static coming through his microphone right now.
Train us to be very different from the way we are. He will bring hope and decency. He will fill the yawning void where our empathy should be. He is medicine. Joe Biden's arms, lean and hard from decades of empathetic labor on our behalf, will encircle us like lights from the Lincoln Memorial. And at that point, well, God knows, anything is possible. If there's a thin bead of sweat forming on your upper lip as you think about all of this, that's okay. Don't feel shame. Shame isn't necessary now. Joe Biden is here. And not just Joe Biden, Jill Biden too, Mrs. Biden, Dr. Biden. Together, the two of them, MSNBC informed us, will redeem this nation through their love. Behold.
What a story, though. What a great love story between Jill Biden and Joe Biden. It's just a different kind of marriage. This is a love match like the Obamas were. So I think that'll be healing for the country, too.
The Biden's marriage is healing for all of us, for the country. The Biden's love is America's love. Jill and Joe are the mother and father of this nation. From their loins we are born and yet reborn. May their names emerge from our lips in praise forever. And so on. That was Cable.
I mean, do you see the tactic that he always does is that he takes like a clip of what someone says and then exaggerates the meaning well beyond the intended meaning of it? That's so... I mean, how else can you weave a narrative without, like, basically taking someone's argument, like the little bit of straw that you get, and then making, like, a bigger straw man for you to fight against? It's perfect for his narrative propaganda.
News today. The funny thing is, and there are many funny things going on right now, every person with a microphone in every TV studio in America today knew the fuller truth when they said things like the ones you just heard. They knew, for example, for certain, that Joe Biden isn't well. Everyone in Washington knows that. But no one said it out loud, not a word. They withheld that news from you as they have for months. So much for speaking truth to power.
I mean, and back in the election days, like I highlighted the fact that Joe Biden, like him speaking was such like, he always dropped the ball whenever he spoke without what is it? What are those called? Oh man, when they read their scripts, oh man, it's not a projector, telegram. No. Man, I can't remember the word for it, but they get, the thing that was there at the inauguration, those two panels that they read their script off of. Like without that, Joe Biden is incredibly like clumsy with his words and his speech and his thought process. And that's always been prevalent. But I mean, Trump has had many speeches where he's incoherently speaking and rambling. So like the difference there really isn't that big between the two. But what he's saying here that Joe Biden isn't well is that he's still just attacking his age and saying that he's going to die soon, which could or couldn't happen. Really, anybody can die at any moment. But just really attacking Joe Biden for his age is in saying he's not well is it's weak shit. It's really weak, and it's just like it's low hanging fruit ultimately. That's by saying he's not well but not highlighting any serious medical condition that he's suffering. That's just low hanging fruit, honestly. And it's not like he's reached the level of Woodrow Wilson where his wife is running everything behind the scenes.
On the other hand, what did you expect? You've watched the lying for years now. You know what it is. You figured out how it works. So it dawned on us today that maybe we ought to stop playing all these stupid media clips every night. It's like watching the town drunk throw up on himself over and over again. Obviously, it's repulsive and shocking. It's hard to turn away. But can you really be surprised by it? Throwing up on themselves is what town drunks do. If you keep watching them as they do it, maybe after a while you are part of the problem. Maybe so. In any case, we flipped off CNN and decided to check out Joe Biden's speech for ourselves. And it was interesting, actually, both for what it said and for what it didn't say. One particular part of this speech stuck out especially. Now, we didn't support Joe Biden for president. You probably guessed that. But if we're being totally honest here, and we want to be honest, we have to say it was very hard to disagree with this specific part of the address. Watch.
On this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. With unity, we can do great things, important things.
Bringing America together, Biden said, uniting our people, uniting our nation, to which we said as we watched it, and we meant it when we did, amen, unity. That is precisely what this country needs more than it needs anything. We are all in this together, every single American, and we have no choice but to hang together. Let's finally accept that we are one country and act like we are, and make this a better place for everyone. Unity. No decent person opposes that. If Joe Biden can bring unity to this country,
this podcast does oppose that. There is no unity with fascists, and it's almost in the same vein as like Republicans and conservatives will have no unity with socialists. And there are people in this country who do support authoritarianism, and so long as it protects so-called American values. So, the unity that Tucker Carlson is agreeing with here, I think is much easier for the moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. But there are people who are further down the line of these political spectrums that can't actually find unity. And so what are we going to do to actually de-radicalize these people when both of their goals and what they want to see from this country do actually oppose each other? And so long as the status quo continues to necessitate the need for moderates, they're going to play the idea that, there is no bridge between the Republican and Democrat Party because the existence of the far right and the far left who want to achieve actual, changes in the material conditions that is either socialism or further down on the right authoritarianism. So the unity in this country, while it does sound nice, it does sound pleasant to me, I actually don't see it possible until, capitalism makes a significant change. But, you know, if you reach the level of authoritarianism, then you're still going to have resistance. So unity, yeah, I don't see how. I really don't. Unless, you know, I honestly believe unless like the working class really unites and creates this super union to where a general strike is possible, then, you know, the working class can unite against the bourgeois capitalist class. But anything other than that, it's kaputs. And I don't really see that union general strike happening anytime soon either. So
He will be a legitimately great president. But there's a catch. There always is a catch. We're going to bring America together, Joe Biden told us today, but not everyone is going to be included. Unity doesn't mean every single American, because not everyone who is born within our borders really is an American. Some of us are beyond the pale of citizenship morally. We may have American passports and birth certificates, but effectively, we are hostile foreigners. We are the enemy. We must be defeated. Here's who Joe Biden says those people are.
A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
We will defeat political extremists.
So yet again, it's the same thing that Tucker Carlson did in the last episode or segment that he did, and that he's like kind of obfuscating the line between who the Democrats are talking about. And again, it's mostly about the right-wing militia groups that are mobilizing and bolstering. And so I'm genuinely interested when we do see events of stochastic terrorism, how Fox News is going to skirt away from that issue. And, you know, is he still going to try and lump sum every Trump supporter with these people? Because that's what he's doing right now. But since he doesn't actually highlight who Joe Biden is talking about, which is the militia groups and the more active political movements within those, that allows him to seem like it's just an average normal Republicans being attacked. And it's not necessarily true. It would be great to de-radicalize people away from supporting Trump, but that's not going to happen under these right-wing militia groups who are much more dedicated to that authoritarian, even Christian fundamentalist ideology that they all seem to kind of coalesce around.
Domestic terrorists, white supremacists. Those are America's enemies. We must wage.
I mean, even the FBI had said that white supremacist militias are a great danger of domestic terrorism. So again, he's really just ignoring the militias and focusing in as if this is just on Trump supporters in general. And that, again, reinforcing in the building blocks of the victimhood that they're going to feel over the next 4 years.
Wage war against them. We must, quote, defeat those people. That's what Biden said today. It seemed like a highly significant part of his speech, and maybe a significant part of the Democratic Party's governing agenda going forward. We're not imagining this. We weren't the only ones who noticed it. People who voted for Joe Biden heard it too. Watch.
I heard a declaration of war against white supremacy and against the lies that brought our democracy to the brink. And President-elect Biden will inherit an unprecedented domestic security crisis.
A declaration of war against white supremacy. Now, you may not have noticed that because on one level, it's not very remarkable. Not many Americans support white supremacy. Most people in this country find it disgusting, of course, and they should. But the question is, what is it exactly? Now that we're waging war on white supremacists, can somebody tell us in very clear language what a white supremacist is?
It's so funny that he's been doing this for so long, and he's been accused of being a white nationalist, and yet he still doesn't know what white supremacy is. But, you know, obviously he's playing dumb. But, you know, let's just get the dictionary definition right here. The belief that white people constitute a superior race and should therefore dominate society, typically to the exclusion or detriment of other racial and ethnic groups, in particular black or Jewish people. There is a clear definition, Tucker, and it is in the dictionary. So
that's not some picayune semantic question. Joe Biden isn't a high school debate coach. Joe Biden is the new president of the United States. Joe Biden controls the largest military and largest law enforcement agencies in the world. He has now declared war. So we should know specifically and precisely who exactly he has declared war on. We have a right to know that. Innocent people could be hurt in this war. They usually are. There could be collateral damage in this war, and the casualties will be Americans. So again, what is a white supremacist? You might be surprised to learn just how broad the definition for that has become. Bloomberg News has described a wall along our southern border as, quote, a monument to white supremacy, so be certain not to support that. Colin Kaepernick, who seems...
It is, because not allowing asylum seekers and immigrants into the country and this giant symbol that says we want to keep you out, such as a border wall, it is kind of a symbol of white supremacy because it doesn't allow the country to further its like multiracial population to grow. It like already, I can't remember by what year that the white ethnic group, or I guess the white complexion in this country is going to become the minority. But that's what it is. It's saying, hey, brown immigrants, we don't want you coming in here and muddying our waters. So yeah, it is kind of sort of a fucking symbol to white supremacy, Tucker.
To have the unequivocal support of corporate America, calls the 4th of July an example of white supremacy. So you'd better put away the fireworks and the hot dogs.
I don't know who actually said that, but Trump's speech on the 4th of July was a highlight of American exceptionalism and white nationalism. And the 1776 report also, too, is a support of white supremacy by saying that we shouldn't criticize the founding fathers for supporting slavery. So, yeah. There were acts of, emboldening white supremacists throughout Trump's era, even though he didn't take direct actions to send more people to concentration camps, although there were concentration camps for the immigrants and migrants, the asylum seekers who happened to be brown.
The United States Army, a trusted institution if there ever was one, has used an entire manual on what is and what is not white supremacy. So you should know this. Among the telltale signs of a committed white supremacist are these: celebrating Columbus Day, using the term American exceptionalism.
I mean, but, Columbus was a white supremacist who committed acts against colored people. So, celebrating it without any critical thought whatsoever and just being like, Columbus was such a great man. There is a hint of white supremacy in there as well, because you're basically forgetting and apologizing for the atrocious acts that even Christopher Columbus went to jail for. So, yeah.
Any support for federal border security or English-only measures or, quote, education funding from property taxes, all white supremacy. Using the phrase, there's only one human race, is white supremacy too, according to the Army. And of course, voting for Donald Trump. All white.
What? Like, can he provide a site for that? How do you say there's one human race and that is white supremacy? Like, by saying there's only the human race, that completely absolves any racial, existence and that we're all just humans. That's not white supremacy. I don't know where the fuck he got that. White supremacy is saying that there's only one human race and it's white.
Supremacy. Here's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, if you're supporting the same guy as the Ku Klux Klan, yeah, you can make that argument.
Say you don't buy those definitions. Let's say you're, for example, white but poor, and you have trouble accepting the idea that you're benefiting from some kind of structural advantage. You better shut up about it if you know what's good for you, because according to the United States Army, the, quote, denial of white privilege is a classic sign of, yes, white supremacy. So no complaining. You can see the problem with this.
I mean, yeah, if you deny the existence of white privilege, then that serves in the case that white supremacy. It helps serve that by furthering the ignorance of people's implicit and explicit biases. It's not thinking critically either. So it helps white supremacy, even though it might not be necessarily overt white supremacy.
Definitely can see the problem. This show was not on the air for 6 months before there was an organized and highly aggressive campaign by prominent Democrats to denounce us as white supremacists.
Remember when Tucker Carlson had to fire his editor-in-chief because they went on to forums and said some white supremacist shit? Yeah, Tucker Carlson had to take a little hiatus during that. You guys remember that? It was back in 2020. Yeah.
The first time it happened, the people who work on this show, many of them kids, were shocked and horrified by that. White supremacists? What's worse than that? The phrase evokes images of burning crosses and lynchings. It's awful. In our case, it was totally undeserved. This show is completely opposed to the practice of judging people on the basis of their skin color. We have said that repeatedly every week for 4 years. No show in all media has said it more or meant it more sincerely. Why have we said that? Why are we opposed to judging people on the basis of their race? Not simply because we were taught to oppose doing that, though we were, but because it's immoral. And it's immoral because we believe in God. That's the real answer. Believing in God doesn't make you a good person, unfortunately. But believing in God does answer the question of where we came from. God made us. That's what believers believe. Once you understand that, it is impossible to think that any one race is inherently better or worse than any other race. Because
no, it's not, because like Manifest Destiny was the driver of robbing land from Native Americans and giving it to white people. And the whole identity, like the Christianity provided this idea, since, you know, the Europeans who landed in America and who brought slaves from Africa were Christians, and so they knew the light of Jesus and God, while these other people were blasphemous sinners who were living in the dark, and that's why they deserved to be dominated by the white race who was chosen by God. Like, it goes all the way down the line. So the belief in God did not eliminate white supremacy. It in fact emboldened it throughout history.
God made every person. God assigns identical moral value to every individual. God cares about all of us equally.
And, you know, even since the creation of the Constitution, that they said that, like, all of our rights inscribed in the Constitution were God-given rights. But God forgot black people at the start of this country, considering them 3/5 people, and then eventually through the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment finally gave them full citizenship rights. So, cool beans, Tucker. Good understanding of history from this guy.
So we are judged by what we do, not by how we were born. We really believe that. Most Americans really believe that. It's not an accident that Martin Luther King was a Christian minister and that Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong were not. Secular leaders.
Yeah, but Martin Luther King was also a socialist. So he may have been Christian, but he was also socialist.
Are the ones most likely to count their populations by race and then to embrace collective punishment. Through history, they often have. We've said all of that before on the show many times. So the question is, why have they kept denouncing us as, of all things, white supremacists?
Because you had to fire your editor-in-chief for being a white supremacist. That's why, Tucker Carlson. And also because you obfuscate the history of this country. Like, I'm sure that he would defend the existence of the 1776 report, which basically highlights that, you know, the founding fathers shouldn't be judged for their holding of slaves. Yeah, so, like, you don't overtly, you know, support white supremacy. In fact, in your words, you deny them. Or you condemn them, but then when it comes time to actually use history to understand white supremacy and racial issues in this country, you're not willing to do that either. So it at least helps white supremacy in its continued maintenance, but not necessarily does it embolden it. So
we thought a lot about that. You should think a lot about it too, now that the Biden administration has declared war on people they claim have white supremacist ideas. In our case, it all started when we began criticizing the people in charge. Other channels fill their air with attacks on so-called Proud Boys, whoever they are, or the QAnon enthusiasts, or...
It's amazing that Tucker Carlson says Proud Boys, whoever they are, as if, like, you couldn't have done the research. But like, of course, like Tucker Carlson is going to assume his viewers don't really know them because there hasn't been a full coverage of them on Fox News. So why would they be aware of the actual Proud Boys and what their beliefs are? And that obfuscation obviously just again helps lend to the idea that there's just these fringe actors that are being used in order to clamp down on regular Republicans.
Gun owners in central Pennsylvania who fix air conditionings for a living and tend to vote the wrong way. They go after those people, and you can see why. Attacking those people isn't hard. None of them have real power. They don't. Let's be honest, they don't. But private equity does have power, a lot of power. So does Google, so does Citibank, so does the government of China, so does even silly Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with her massive social media accounts. Those are the people who run our country, and they don't like to be criticized.
Did he just say that communist China runs our country? Wow. Wow.
On the other hand, they don't care to defend themselves directly with reason and fact. Often they can't do that. So instead they denounce you, your critics, their critics, as white supremacists. And then they just ignore what you say.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that. Like I said earlier, it's a reductionist tactic here. By focusing in merely just on the white supremacist actions, you're not really looking at the broadening clampdown of authoritarianism in general. And you know, yeah, and the increase of power within private companies. But Tucker Carlson is using that reductionism to his favor to say this is what they're after. They're after anybody who may or may not look like a white supremacist. And really, I'm more worried about people who accept authoritarianism without blatantly knowing that it's authoritarianism.
Fine. We've dealt with this for years. We're used to it. It no longer hurts our feelings. We understand what's going on. But there's a new regime in power starting today, and they seem to be planning to accelerate things dramatically. They're getting the FBI and the Pentagon involved in this hunt for people who may criticize them. That's a very
That's not who they're going after.
Big change. And you should understand what it's really about.
And you're not going to do that through Tucker Carlson. You're going to basically get what you should feel about what it is really about. And that has been this episode of Talks News. Oh man, that was a whole lot of bullshit. Whew. Well, I don't know, like, subscribe, review, rate, all that good stuff, and follow me on Twitter at ToxinPod, ToxnPod. And I will be back yet again with a more segment-oriented episode. Like I said, Theory Thursday with Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind has been pushed back until next Thursday. I'm so sorry. But other than that, shall be back with more of this, I don't know, brain-numbing nonsense that only serves to further the divide of this country. So shouts out to Tucker Carlson for making that gap even bigger. I don't know how to close this podcast ever, so I'm just gonna wish you a farewell and just let you know that you are loved and appreciated. That's pretty much it. So we out.